Hello, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Connecting LinkedIn Signals to Sales, Powering Outbound and B2B Revenue in 2026. Here is what we are tackling today. If you are like us and many other B2B organizations and you're running LinkedIn ads and you're running outbound, but you feel like they're not connected, there is a solution that you can take to power your overarching campaigns and drive more revenue across both of those channels, but together fast. And I'm joined by Phil Illich, a LinkedIn ads expert who has been building a full framework for combining LinkedIn ads with a signals-led approach using outbound. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks so much for having me again. This is super cool to be here, and I'm really excited to go over this framework because it's kind of the new framework we're pushing, and I think it's one of the best frameworks for B2B, especially sales-led B2B SaaS. So really excited to get into this and have this conversation with you.
Yeah, brilliant. I am too, because this is like right up our street. Phil, your view is that outbound works best when we have earned the right to show up, and on LinkedIn you can do a lot of activity to warm up B2B prospect potential buyer using thought leader ads, repeated exposure, and then take those signals and almost engage with outbound at the right time. But most B2B organizations aren't doing that, are they? From what you're seeing, what is broken when those channels don't talk to each other?
Yeah, I mean, because most people treat those channels completely separately, they do work separately, but they work extra good together. And I'm kind of, the more I look at it, the more I see it as nearly one channel. You need to be using all those signals from that LinkedIn creates, which we'll go into in a little bit, plus the fact that you can use LinkedIn's one of the best nurture or content delivery platforms for B2B on the planet. It's amazing at delivering content. It's also good at getting conversions, but it's especially good and actually quite affordable for delivering content. So we can deliver this content to a list of prospects and then go outbound to them, because outbound is an amazing way to actually convert, to hit people at the right time. So joining those together just makes complete sense for a lot of other reasons that I haven't mentioned yet. But yeah, there's a lot of ways they work in synergy in a really, really good way.
Yeah, so it's almost like, I mean, it's intent data, but creating your own, I guess, working with that intent data to understand at what point do you reach out, at what point do you engage. And you mentioned signals getting ignored. So what kind of signals on LinkedIn, on website, are B2Bs teams already generating, but they're not acting on?
Yes, there's a ton of signals. So basically there is one of the, a great signal is someone who's been on your website, and you can use an amazing tool like Lead Forensics. But website visits, so if you have LinkedIn ads driving traffic to your website or from any other source, SEO, wherever it's coming from, people are on your pricing page, they're on your website. That's a signal that potentially they're in market for what you're doing. So that's one of the signals. For example, there are multiple other signals. I can go into each signal if you want. But for example, social engagement. So a really great format on LinkedIn is thought leader ads, which is boosted personal posts. And through those, you get people liking, commenting, and engaging with that post. So if your post is on a topic, which is what you're, selling. So for example, I post about LinkedIn ads all the time. Any VP of marketing or someone who's my ICP who's liking that or commenting, it kind of gives me a signal that they might be thinking about it, or there's something that the algorithm's now feeding them content which is related to that topic. So that's a signal that they might be in market. They might not, but it's definitely a signal. And I'm finding that's a really good signal. Yeah. And then, for example, there's also there's a bunch of different signals, but another one is topic listening. So you can use a tool like Triggerfy, which basically does it based on keywords. So again, bring it back to me. We run LinkedIn ads for clients. So anyone else who is talking about LinkedIn ads, we can actually see the commenters and the engagers and not send creepy follow-up messages, but just use that as a signal to our outbound campaigns. Say these people who have been filtered via Clay, make sure they're ICP, and then it can go to filter to our outbound campaigns to make sure it gives us a signal that these people who are liking, commenting again might be in market for what you do. So this is just a few of the signals, but there's a few others as well.
Yeah, and ultimately, like we know outbound works, and we know like once you get in a direct conversation with a buyer, like you've started uh, almost a sales journey, but it's really hard. So this framework, I guess, is designed to support SDRs, outbound teams, sales functions with intel that makes their life easier.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of reasons why outbound is really difficult. One is timing, and this is what it solves for, is a timing element. It's not perfect, it's not perfect at all, but it's we're trying to find any signal that exists. We're trying to work out how high intent it is. But timing is one thing it solves for, because outbound is about timing. You're finding people who are in the market for it. So it's a timing issue. The other one is when you go outbound cold, they don't know who the heck you are, like what you do, what you're serving. You get this email, and it's quite hard to understand sometimes in that one sentence what they do. It's really easy to ignore. But when it's warm bound because we're linking LinkedIn with the outbound, hopefully they already know who you are, what you do. Maybe even the thought leader ad and the outbound profile pictures are exactly the same. So they have some personal brand awareness.
Yeah,
So
nice.
it adds a warm element and a timing element, which just didn't exist before. And we can do that really well now.
Yeah, I love. I mean, I can't think of one um, single sales leader or SDR that wouldn't prefer warm bound as opposed to
Yeah.
like doing their cold calling and outbound. Okay, so I'm excited about the framework. Can you share it with us? What does it look like? How does it work?
Yeah, sure. Do you mind if I share my screen?
No, I would really
Okay.
appreciate that because visually, like, it would really help bring it to life.
Can you see this Canva board here?
I can, yes.
Okay, cool. So basically, in the last webinar that was we talked a lot about the full funnel LinkedIn strategy. So this is what we talked about. This framework actually takes the LinkedIn strategy, but looks at it in a different way. It starts basically from the middle going out. So it starts with accounts. Normally, we get a bunch of accounts, and it could be as low as 1,000 companies. It could be even less than that, or it could be a lot more. So your budget needs to match the amount of companies you have on this list and your audience size. Because one of the main things you need to do with the LinkedIn ads is demand generation. So it's basically deliver content to the people who make sense within these companies with enough frequency and impression. So these people start to understand who you are, what you do, how you work, the social proof. The goal here is to make sure that enough people or a lot of people on this list start to understand, everything about you guys. So this is a thought lead ad. AI tried to make it look like me. It doesn't look like me. But basically, that's a thought lead ad. It comes from your personal profile. So I like to mostly deliver content through thought leader ads, which is these boosted posts. But the goal with stage one is actually like it's more about nurture. It's about delivering content to the ICP. So that's kind of like stage one. I don't know if you had any questions before I.
Well, I was just going to ask about the thought leader ad because I think a lot of people um, get tied up in like what should we talk about with thought leader ads? Like, oh, well, if I have to be a thought leader, then I've got to make it really outside of our solution and outside of our product because otherwise it's not going to be thought leadership. But in our conversations that we've had before, we've talked about thought leadership is just being a thought leader in your space, and that can be in what you're selling, but just having an opinion on it. And I think it's
Yeah.
really important that people know that because otherwise you might get people, if you go too wide with your thought leadership approach, you might get people who engage with the content, but they're not doing anything to deliver a signal because they're just interested in, I don't know, marketing automation or ABM, but not actually. So you've got to go quite specific with it, with your
I'd say so.
opinion.
I'd actually go really strategic with it. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think thought leadership or thought leader, the name is a misnomer. I don't think you actually need to be a thought leader. It's kind of just a way to deliver the content which the algorithm's favoring really well. People like to buy from people. So before the ads used to be from a company with a company logo or whatever it was. Now it's from a person. And the post looks like just a normal post. I mean, this is an AI replica, but it just looks like a normal post. So people engage with it a lot more. So it's a content delivery, format, which is really good. And I think when you're doing thought lead ads, there's a couple of different ways to do it. You can do the organic strategy, which is you're posting 3 to 5 times a week, and you can go way broader, where you can talk from like about the product, about the problem, but you can also talk about your personal life and how life's difficult. So you can go much broader with the kind of content you create in an organic strategy. But if you're just doing the paid strategy, I'd say actually to be really strategic with the type of content you create. And this is, again, kind of a framework I've created. I mean, I've debated with people over this. There are different frameworks. Generally, I'm falling on this at the moment, but this is developing. But I like to start with actually product led. So it's not for leadership at all. It's just like talking about your product. We need to consider, what do these people need to know to be able to, move to the next stage? So they need to know about your product. Why is it awesome? What are these features that can help them? Why are you different from your competitors? How was it before? Us versus them, old versus new. This is the kind of content that's really strategic and we need to do. The second one I like is social proof. So people want to know, that you're actually being used by other people and people are talking really good things about it. So just like social proof, again, this is just like shared the wins you have, testimonials, this kind of stuff. So social proof. And the final one is just like really focused on the problem. So what is the problem you're solving? And often problem and product get merged in because the features solving a problem.
Yeah.
So it gets a bit messy there, but generally this is the framework I've fallen on, the kind of strategic content that I believe we should create.
Yeah, and when you talked about the organic approach, but ultimately, if you are an organization who wants to get started with this quickly, have got quotas and numbers to deliver, that's probably going to take a bit too long. With the thought leadership approach, you go organic first anyway, and then you start to promote it, right? So that builds your audience and builds your awareness, but you get an audience much more quickly because you're obviously paying to advertise.
Yeah, it's a kind of like a shortcut because we're targeting literally this list and the job titles that make sense. So for me, it'll be like VPs of marketing, demand gen people. It's a very specific list of companies, which with very specific job titles. So you're just delivering the content to the exact right ICP. And, that is a bit of a shortcut, but there you do need a budget on the other hand to do it. Whereas with organic content, if it's just you founder led, it's your time, which also has a cost, obviously. And what some people, some companies do, which I think is an amazing strategy, is they convince 2, 3, 4, even up to like 10, 20 employees to actually start doing their own content. And then suddenly that organic, because there's so many people posting on a daily basis from their organization, the kind of free impressions that come from that is actually quite mega, like quite a lot. It's a bit more scattered and not as specific because the algorithm will push it in different directions. Yeah. Whereas the ads will be specifically to those companies.
Yeah. And I guess in an ideal world, you're going to do both, aren't you? But I think I wanted to go back to that because that was one of the things that I think when we started out on this approach that we needed clarity on, is that be a thought leader on your problem. Like if you want to engage buyers and not like a more generic thought leader, like talk about the problem, because then you'll get the signals from people who understand that that's a problem for them too.
Exactly. I mean, and that's the whole point. If someone's actually engaging with the problem or the product, maybe less social proof, but that's definitely a signal, that if your ICP is engaging with you're talking about a specific feature that solves a specific problem and someone's liking that, it's not like a really high intent one, but it's definitely someone I would go outbound to and communicate to.
Okay. So you said this works for both ABM and organizations with a broader ICP. Is it the fact that you can upload any size of list you like, and that's what makes it flexible?
Exactly. Because also like sometimes people don't realize that your audience size should reflect your budget. If you don't have enough budget, say if you have 100,000 audience, but your budget's, a couple K a month, you're not going to be able to hit even a fraction. Your penetration rate on that list is going to be really, really, really tiny. So you're not really doing it justice. I'd rather match the audience size with the budget, so you can actually saturate that audience with enough penetration, enough content. My go-to is 5 bits of content with at least 5 impressions with each content. So you can do the maths with your CPM on how much budget you need. But it doesn't make sense to have a really small budget and a really big list, for example. You should try to match that. So that's why I think, that's really important. The second part of this is some companies, literally their entire total addressable market is 500 companies or 1,000 companies. That's the entire. So we might as well just take that list, and that's going to be our foundation of our marketing. And this works especially well because with ABM, I think outbound is even more important with ABM. You do need probably less automated and more personalized, but warming them up with LinkedIn ads, then getting the sales rep to go out makes a lot more sense with ABM, especially.
Okay, so just going back to the warming up and the creating of the signals, because obviously in the outer circle, you've got almost what happens next with those signals, but you specifically mentioned thought leadership ads. What about other types of ads that would create signals? Are you using that? Would you use those too, or would you keep it restricted more to thought leader ads?
For specifically the outbound for collecting signals, and we can go into the warm signals stuff in a bit. I think thought leadership would be 80 to 90% of the format we use. But in a larger, if you watch if whoever's watching this now watches the other webinar we did, the other formats are really useful for different objectives, which is for trying to get the conversion within LinkedIn ads themselves. So trying to get the lead gen forms, trying to get people to the website. So other formats are important, like videos really good, documents really good. This is for a full funnel LinkedIn strategy. But specifically for the outbound, I would mostly focus on for lead ads.
Okay. And obviously, depending on the size of the audience, you might say, right, well, we're just going to focus on thought leadership from the CEO, the CMO, just because we've got an ABM list and we want to hear their voices and, connect like that and get those signals like that. If you've got a wider ICP, do you go wider with your thought leadership approach?
Sometimes normally I like to not overcomplicate it, and it depends how much resources the company has. But for example, if we can, sometimes matching a product person, if they're targeting product people sense, or if it's so matching an engineer talking about engineering stuff to engineering.
Yeah.
Tech, we deal with a lot of very AI techie type solutions, and they're selling into engineering or something like this. So talk to engineers makes a lot of sense. They talk their own jargon. Jargon normally is not a good thing to do, but sometimes if marketers saying GTM and demand, we get what we're talking about. For example, in our own, we have so much, jargon between us, but we get it. And same with engineers and same with techie people. So sometimes it makes sense, depending on the context.
Yeah, that's a really good bit of advice, isn't it? Especially if you've got quite a wide decision-making unit. If your budget allows, you could do thought leader ads to your influencers as well as your decision makers.
Yeah, absolutely. And another way to do thought lead ads is with the social proof. And for example, the company instantly does this really, really well. They get other people to talk about them, and then they boost it with thought lead ads.
Yeah.
They have I don't know how many they have. They have a lot of people who always, there's all these GTM engineers who are oh, we built out this thing, and it's always the different tools they use, and instantly is part of that. They'll take that and boost those posts. So their ICP sees all these different people talking about how they use instantly, and it's just the best social proof. Other people talking about you is a really, a really good one.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so your ads are out there, and you started to create signals. What are the strongest signals? What would you look for first?
So basically there's a few here that I've put. And as mentioned before, we have the social engagement. So this means anyone who's engaging with the post that you're putting out. So that's liking or commenting. We can get that via a tool like Triggerfy, or we're using another tool actually now. It always goes through Clay. Clay is an amazing go-to-market it's where everything goes through, and it can do a lot of things. But one of the things it can do is actually filter for ICP, and then also enrich the contact. So it can go to the email, we can enrich it with whatever stuff we need. So everything kind of goes through Clay. And then we go outbound. So it's the social engagement. Second one, as we mentioned, was website visitors to warm outbound using lead forensics is a great one. But yeah, anyone who's going on your website, we can now, obviously, using lead forensics and other tools, get part of those people, understand whether or not ICP, and then go outbound to them. Again, I have Slack here on all of them because sometimes you don't want to automate it. Sometimes you just want to ping it to an SDR already enriched. Clay can also add like a description of who the person is, what the company is, and any other information the SDR might need, because Clay is super cool like that. And so sometimes, depending on the company, they might want to just ping it to the SDR rather than doing the first level or automated. And for example, we spoke about topic listening as well, which again uses Triggerfy or some other tools, which is based on keywords. So it's looking for keywords of people posting on the topic that your product's based around, and you can find the people commenting and liking, filter it by ICP again, and then ping it to wherever you need it to go. Another one is, so this one's really amazing. I've seen quite a lot of success with, like, whenever we're running demo ads on LinkedIn, sometimes it's not, often, but sometimes the SDRs aren't as quick as they should be to follow up. So they might take 24 hours, even 48 hours, sometimes they're on holiday, different time zones. And a quick follow-up is really, really important. So honestly, we can now just do that initial follow-up using, pushing things through Clay and just doing it the first one, which is automated, but it's a connection request and potentially an email just saying, hey, we see that you've signed up for demo. A lot of these demo requests, they don't actually book in the calendar. So there's a fall between demo request and actually booking time in the calendar. So this flow, we've seen quite a big uptick on the conversion rate from demo request to actually like turning up and, going to the scheduling in the calendar.
Yeah. Is that so? I'm interested to get your take on this. With regards incorporating email versus LinkedIn. So if they're responding to an ad on LinkedIn and they've done a demo request, or they've responded to a conversation ad and said they're interested, like, I completely agree with you. Like, speed is of the essence, and that's why lead forensics exists, because that, fastest, being fast ultimately gets the deal. But if you're taking it, like, what is best? Would you take it off to another channel if they've just responded to you on LinkedIn, or would you try and keep it on LinkedIn? And how do you do that in an automated way?
I would do both. I've just seen, like, in fact, I would even potentially ping it to an SDR just to quickly get them on the phone call and say, hey, you booked at a demo, you haven't actually scheduled time. Can I schedule it right now?
Yes,
I know
absolutely,
this sounds aggressive,
yeah.
But it's honestly the companies that are doing it, especially with the quick phone call, are killing it. Like, it's that phone call element, which I haven't added here, I would say is the best way to do it. I would send it on LinkedIn. I would also send the follow-up email. You can time the email a few days later based on if they've answered or not. So you can configure it in many different ways. Often I see just like a LinkedIn connection request with an email. Once they've accepted, either they booked in or not. So we can send this data back to Clay and stop the flows as well. But we're basically trying to get them, like, this conversion rate is really important. And some companies are seeing quite low conversion from demo to actually turning up to the phone call. So this is a great solution to that.
Right. Okay. So you're seeing that drop out there.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I guess in some instances, like, you'll know, and a lot of instances, like, if you look at all of these things, you'll know exactly who, if an individual is engaged with your ad on LinkedIn, sharing that data with Clay and enriching it to get email, or even just do a connection request, is easy. What happens if you don't know who they are?
As in, like,
you just know the business,
just the company? Yeah. Again,
yeah.
If you have, so this would be more on the warm bound. So the signals, like, say for a demo or actually with website visitors, we don't know. So that's a good example. A lot of the other signals will have the individual. So that's really great. Like a demo request or content lead will be an individual. The topic listening will be individual, the social engagement individual. The website visits in Europe at least won't be the individual. In the US, it will. Well, roughly. I know the data's not perfect, so basically with that, because we've been targeting specific job titles, we have some. It's definitely a guess. It's definitely a guess.
Yeah.
Often it's like 3 or 4 job titles we're targeting, so it'll be one of those, and maybe we have to start going through them one by one and sending them a message, or we got to figure out the best way to do that. But yeah, you're right. That's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. But you could put them into an automated flow and ultimately look at where you get the engagement. And could you use that for LinkedIn ads where you're like serving a lot of impressions to an organization as well? Obviously that's further down, like they're not going to be as qualified as like someone who's actually engaged with your post, but I'll just...
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've actually got this tab up here. So this is like really cool. So you can see engagement levels. So again, I talked to you about this the other day, but often the people who actually convert aren't actually even the engagers. They're the ghosts. They're the people who read your posts organically, at least, and they never like or comment. And then suddenly they book a call and you don't really know where they came from. And it turns out they've been reading everything, but they never give any signal at all. So we can see the companies here that are engaging with paid impressions, for example, and we can see if they're highly engaged or not. So that's based on a ratio. And this can be turned into both an audience for retargeting, but also pushed out to what we call warm bound, which is this here. So warm bound is what we spoke about, where basically we got 2 ways of doing warm bound. One is we just make sure we hit that penetration rate and impression frequency rate. So we know that this list is actually warmed up. We've been warming up this list for 6 weeks. Now let's go outbound to it, warm bound to it, basically, and hopefully a lot of these people should already know about the product, the social, all this kind of stuff. And the second way is actually using a tool like Fibbler, which takes a lot of this data here. Fibbler has basically a lot of this data, and we can then export it from Fibbler to Clay and go basically base it on, ad engagement levels. So only go out to the very highly engaged companies, both organically and paid. Again, we're not going to know the people in this way. So we would have to make that, go out to the job titles.
Yeah. But then that, like you say, that's where your other AI like Clay and stuff come in, because that can help you with that, can't it?
Yeah, totally. And warm bound, I think, is really great, especially if you add the phone calling element. Warm calling makes a lot more sense than cold calling. People should already know, about you guys. So yeah.
100%. Okay, so once you've captured a signal, now you mentioned that, and there's different types of big signals. There is an engagement, there's an actual, they've downloaded a piece of content or they've requested a demo. You said speed is of the essence. So we know that teams are dropping the ball there, but what else should happen next?
In terms of what should happen next,
once you've got that signal, you've enriched your data and they're going into those workflows. What do they look like?
Yeah, I wish I got one up now, but basically, once they go out, well, each workflow is a little bit different, and so even like a content lead versus a demo lead, the workflow will be slightly different, and the messaging will be different on each of these campaigns. So we treat them each as their own campaign, and the messaging needs to make sense. Again, we're not trying to be creepy in terms of we saw you like that post. I get these emails all the time and I'm like, this is a really bad approach. We're not trying to do that kind of approach. We need to be, we need to be respectful that we're collecting this data and using these signals, and we don't want to be creepy. So we need to do a really good messaging, which is relevant. But sometimes, for example, with a social engagement one, you can match the post to the messaging. So the post might be, say, I might write a post about warm bound, cold or whatever, and then I'm seeing we take the engagement from that one post. We know which post it comes from, and it also filters in Clay, but the messaging can then be related to the fact I'm talking about warm bound rather than LinkedIn ads. Generally, we can talk, make the messaging related to the topic of the post, so that we can match that. For example, that's potentially a good idea, potentially a bad idea if it goes over the creepy line, but it's something to discuss for sure. And for example, a content lead should be treated very differently to a demo lead. Demo is all about you really want to do a demo of us, we just need to get you in the calendar now. So it's a very, it's a quite a hot signal. Whereas a content lead is someone just downloading a bit of content. So with content leads, what I do is actually send more content. So I like, for example, our internal flow is I love content leads. And the reason why most people gave up on doing content flows rather than just going for the demo is because we didn't have these workflows before. And all these content leads would get, we would get really good cost per lead, but just a content lead, and we'd get a large volume of them. And this volume would just get pushed to SDRs, and only 3 to 4% of those are actually in market or ready to do a demo. So SDRs would just get exhausted, say, 95% of these are crap, we don't like them, and they would stop taking them seriously. So people stopped doing content leads. But because now we have this workflow, we kind of have this barrier before it goes to an SDR. So content lead comes in, it goes through Clay, enriches, checks for ICP. Then what I do is just actually send them a message saying, thanks for, downloading XYZ. Here's actually another bit of content, which is really, really mega and really awesome. So it has to be actually good content. I have these big Loom videos. So I link them to a Loom video. Often they're really, hopefully even good content. So we're not like trying to do more than just like give them more. We're not trying to like, hey, jump on a demo. We're not trying to do that. We're just trying to warm them up still. Same with the email. In the email I have, thanks so much for downloading the content. You can find the content here. By the way, we have way more other really useful bits of content. Check it all out. It's very hands-off like that.
Yeah. So then, like a content lead, like you say, you wouldn't handle those straight off to an SDR or sales. They can go into this fantastic workflow. But at what point in that automation flow, like what signal would they give then? You could go, right, these guys are ready to talk to sales now. How do you develop that?
So in the emails that follow up, personally, you should have hopefully a bunch of follow-up emails, which is just really helpful and actually really good emails. So like this is the challenge most people have. For example, us internally, we have something like 52% open rate on 6 to 7 emails. So, that's really good. I'm really happy with that. Good, and each email, you're only as good as your last email. So if they're reading the email, that was helpful, they'll open the next one and the next one and the next one. And we're actually building this out to be a long-term nurture thing. But at the bottom of each email, it says, PS, if you want to work with us, contact us. There's subtle call to action within it. And for example, you could go a little bit more aggressive. If you see someone who's opened the last 5 emails, maybe ping it to an SDR. Again, you can do this with your tools. It can actually ping it to Slack saying, hey, this guy's opened 5 emails in a row or 3 emails in a row. Maybe reach out to them in a more salesy way, like, hey, would you like to do a demo? Is this something that interests you?
Yeah. I mean, you're going to get tons of signals on other channels as well, aren't you? Like, you'll get website visits, you might get more engagement with posts, like is then tying it all together to go, all right, all these things mean that like there's definitely like that hot prospect who's tipped themselves into the bottom of the funnel. So
it's kind of like trying to mine for in-market leads, because it's really hard, and that's what we're trying to do with these signals. And I think these signals are going to constantly develop with all the new tools coming out. But that's kind of the goal, is like, because only 3 to 4% of your market's in market, even sometimes less, depending on what you do. So we're just trying to work out like who is that percent in the outbound. Whereas with the nurture stuff, we're trying to reach everyone to nurture them over time. But the outbound's catching them hopefully with the right timing. So, a lot of these people might not be in market yet, but they might be in 6 months or whatever. So we need to make sure we're delivering content. They're getting, they're understanding who you are, what you do, and all this kind of stuff. So when they're in market, they're thinking about you and not your competitor or someone else.
Yeah, and you know what? They're at least engaged. They're raising their hand, aren't they, to say, actually, I have this problem, or this is of interest to me, which is way better than, well, yeah, we really want to work with this business because they're in this industry and they've got this many, it's still like a lot more than we might have had previously. So when you have these signals, you mentioned that the kind of like engagement process that follows that gives you much higher connection acceptance rates on LinkedIn as well, because you're going off the back of an engagement. What kind of things are you seeing?
Yeah, so I didn't gather the data here, but if anyone wants to ping me, I'm going to bring it out. I'll probably post about it really soon on LinkedIn. But for example, there's one off the top of my head, which is the engagement from which one was there now? So website visitors is an interesting one, and you get the data on that. But it was the social engagement to connection rate is like 50%.
Yeah, I swear we had a chat and it was like 52% or something.
It was
And I
like
was like,
52%. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So I posted about this the other day, and my brain just went a bit
yeah.
off there.
I remember because it was a great post.
Yeah. So it's like like seeing the fact that 52% of people are connecting rather than the average of like 15% or something like this. So it's a really good, good sign. And because with LinkedIn, you only have 40 or 35 or 40 connection requests you can do a day, it's best to use them through the signals. If you can get 35 to 40 or as many signals as you can during the day, I'd rather use those connection requests through signals rather than just like hoping and just reaching out random ICP.
Yeah. It's basically it's a lot colder, isn't it? So it's not like this is like it all makes complete sense, but you're not gonna plug this in and it's going to happen overnight. So what metrics should we put in place to start to judge success from the off beyond like obviously leads and revenue? That will all come, but like how do we measure success from the off?
Yeah, I mean, this definitely a tough one. There are so many, and it depends which part of the flow you're looking at. But like right at the start, you need to make sure that your ads are actually getting engagement and comments, and you have a good click-through rate, and all this kind of stuff. So you need to make sure you're A/B testing what kind of content you're putting through it. And often, like a lot of this stuff sounds complicated, maybe, but it's all technical and it's all very doable. And you kind of once you do one of these flows, you can do them again and again. They're not that difficult, actually. The hard part or the more arty part is the content, in my opinion. And this is always the case, even with the LinkedIn ads. I think like a lot of this is like the basics you should be right. You should have a good strategy. You should technically know how to optimize and use the right formats. All that's like the basics. The hard part, in my opinion, is content. Having the right bits of content to engage people, nudge them, get them excited about who you guys are. It could be funny content. It could just be really engaging, informative content. It's definitely the more art than science part, which is the hard part of this entire flow.
Yeah, but exactly as you say, it's like what is creating that connection, and it's your ICP. Like you should know, but at least you'll be able to measure it quickly because you've gone narrow with your list and said like either this is my ABM list of like 100, 1,000 businesses, or this is my whole ICP. But like if they're not engaging, you've got a problem because they're the ones who need to buy your solution.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, basically, like everyone wants to know revenue, pipeline, leads, or demo requests. And before that, there are a bunch of different metrics we can look at, which is depending on what we're looking for. But like with these flows, often it is connection requests and whether or not there's positive replies. Plus, here we're looking at the metrics around the thought leader ads. So there's kind of different metrics depending on which part of this system we're looking at, and we can then see whether or not that cog is working well or not. But honestly, the content is always the hardest part to get right. Everything else is a bit more technical, and once you've done it once, you can do it again and again.
Yeah. So bearing in mind, you said the content's the hardest part to get right. If a B2B team wanted to start using signals in February, what's the simplest place to begin?
I would keep it really simple and just start creating thought leader ads. So like basically start posting, trying to think of just like 5 posts. Don't try to do 100 or something, just do 5 posts. Try to do a couple product led, 1 social proof, 1 problem, like just something like 5 posts. And just put them out into the world and look at the metrics based on the list you're targeting. So keep it really simple. And around the thought leader ads, you need to look at like clicks to landing page is a really important one that I look at a lot because I do want my thought leader post clicking to landing pages. And so another one is the engagement rate, dwell time. These are the kind of metrics that really do matter. with your 4 lead ads. And if you use a tool like Fibbler, you can actually start seeing like what you're going to find, even if you just start with the LinkedIn ads side of 4 lead ads, you're going to start seeing some inbound, or you're going to see more branded search or direct, because people are going to see the ads. They're going to see who you are, what you are doing. They're going to go to your website, and then eventually later they might come back for a branded search and like ask for a demo. So using a tool like Fibbler will show your influence pipeline from this. And this is really an important part, because we never really used to be able to, again, because LinkedIn is like a really good distribution channel for content, we found it really difficult to attribute for that. And now like a tool like Fibbler plus a bunch of other tools out there are really good at showing that attribution. So anyone who ends up going to your CRM and becomes pipeline or revenue, we can tie that back to whether or not they saw X amount of ads before they did that, which shows this like influence pipeline metric. So yeah, I'd also give a shout out to Fibbler. We love using Fibbler. We're pushing it to everyone we can. But yeah, these are the kind of metrics I think are really important.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it. So what's the biggest mistake that you see teams do when they start to combine LinkedIn and outbound?
What do you think is the answer to that? What were you thinking?
Basically, passing an engagement straight through to an SDR. Like, that would be my take. It's like, it's still like it. Yeah. Like, I think you have to take, well, it depends what the signal is. Obviously, if it's a super hot signal, then that can go straight through. And I guess the mistake would be not jumping on it fast enough. But equally, you don't want sales SDRs to get disheartened with what you're doing and start to give them stuff that's like too high up in the funnel, because they'll just think everything's rubbish and then that's it. You've lost them. Yeah,
so that's kind of why this works really well, and why the content leads actually are working again, because we're putting that filter between the SDR, and so they're only replying to like the positive replies. So anyone who's like, hey, this is, or like, if there's a positive reply, that's when they jump in, and we can do that. So yeah, that's definitely one of the problems. I think, don't know what problem, to be honest with you. Like there are quite a few moving cogs, and so you're just like linking it up in the right way. I do think one of the most important part is the list. And I don't think people put enough effort into their list sometimes. Like just getting a really high quality list, I think is really important, because that list is literally the foundation of everything. If it's a crap list, nothing's going to work. So for example, if you have a bigger TAM, but you don't want it to be too big, you don't want your list to be too big, then you can layer this list on with a signal itself. So for example, it could be recently funded companies, which is an extra layer to bring down the list. Yes. Or for example, companies which have recently hired a VP of marketing. I don't know, that'll probably bring it too small.
And would you use Clay for that, or would you use Insight on LinkedIn? Like, how would you build that Insight?
Yeah, probably Clay would do a lot of this, but there are so many tools out there which either link into Clay or do it individually that we're using to find these lists. But the list is really important. I do like building that extra signal. I think recently funding makes a lot of sense for a lot of people because they have budget. But I wrote it down here. Here's a couple, which is like a product announcement could be.
Yeah.
There's one client we're using this for specifically, and for them that's really relevant to what they do. But a new hire, recently funded. There's a few others like this, which you can make the list kind of a bit tighter and giving that extra signal. Got
it. Phil, I could talk about this all day, but like we've nattered on for nearly an hour now. It is fascinating, and I think such a great approach. And I love how agile Kin is in terms of, you're always embracing the new and looking for like, how can we leverage everything that we've got in LinkedIn, because it is such a powerful tool. Where can people contact you if they want to hear more about this?
Yeah, so I always just say as I always say, I'm literally addicted to LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's what you're going to be. So
you can just DM me on LinkedIn, or go to kiin.co and just
send you some signals.
Send me the signals. I'm going to harass you nonstop after that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, and we will speak very soon.
Thanks so much, Kirsty.